The man is ready.
Expletive. Racial slur.
Always a good start. Always a good start to the podcast. All right. Then the last thing is to hit the record button on the audio. Let me bring up the rundown. Let me take a sip of water and narrate everything I'm doing.
Yeah, that's what you do. That's a real gross sounding sip.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. You ready, Mike?
I'm ready.
All right. 5, 4, 3. It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this. Welcome to the GamesBeat Decides podcast. It is the podcast where we decide everything happening in the world of video games so you don't have to think for yourself. I'm your host, Jeffrey Grubb. With me is
Mike Minotti.
In today's episode, we're going to go over some news. We're going to talk about some games. But first, I want to thank everybody for joining us. You can get more from me and Mike at GamesBeat.com. If you have something to share with us, you can get us at GamesPlusPodcast@VentureBeat.com or on Twitter at GamesBeat or at GB Decides for the podcast itself. If you're watching the video version on Facebook or YouTube or Twitch, there's an audio version of the show that you could subscribe to on the podcatcher of your choice. You could do that through Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and more. Finally, if you like the show, rate us on Apple Podcasts. It helps people find the show. And one big credit, thank you to Carlos Ayin, Insane in the Rain Music on YouTube, for the use of the theme song, which is continuing to be my jam. All right, let's see here. Mike, how you been?
Oh, I've been doing pretty good. I was traveling last weekend. I went to a big wrestling show called All In.
So you went to it?
Fun. I was at All In.
I didn't know. I thought you were watching that live or something, or like paper.
No, I got tickets. Tickets sold out in like 20 minutes, and I kind of in a roundabout way made you get them because the servers were slammed and I had like the tickets ready to check out, and then like I got timed out because things were loading so slow. So I just wrote the customer support and kind of explained the situation, and like they had some set aside for that.
Oh,
so like
cool.
a week later, I was able to like get tickets that way, and they were pretty nice. And yeah, it was crazy. It was such an energetic arena. It was like it's the largest indie wrestling show I think ever, and like the largest non-WWE or non-WCW wrestling show since like '92.
Right.
So it was super cool.
An historic event if you like wrestling, and that's
yes.
So yeah, I am going to do the process to get to subscribe to New Japan because apparently they have it on there. So I'll watch that and then I'll start.
They do. It
New
is.
Japan.
Yeah. It's on. Oh, you mean New Japan buddies? Their next.
Yes.
I think they have like their next major show sometime this month. Kenny Omega's gonna fight Ishii, who's kind of like a stout, like tough guy.
And Kenny Omega is a video gamer, so of course he's gonna win.
Oh yeah, well he's a champion and like on a super hot streak and the best in the world, so he is gonna win. But yeah, his finishing move is called the One Winged Angel, which is gives you an idea of his mindset.
That sounded like an exciting show.
That's great.
I was at an exciting show of myself, PAX West. It was mostly exhilarating because of the lack of security, and it made my heart beat every time I went in there. And like anyone could just walk in here. I mean, you started thinking about it, yeah. There's a million entrances to that place. PAX West happens in Seattle each year. For anyone who is still unfamiliar. And coming just a little bit after the Madden shooting, it's on the mind, and you go there and you see signs that are like, if you see something, say something. And then I saw a handful of cops here and there, but the rest of the time it's just this. It's happening all over downtown Seattle and in various hotels, in addition to the convention center. And each of these places just have a million entrances, and you can go up to most of the checkpoints to get inside, like theaters for panels or whatever, even without a badge. Because it's in a hotel, people need to go to their hotel rooms even if they're not going to PAX. So it's a thing where you start thinking about all the scary possibilities, and it is a thing where you can't imagine how they would actually secure this sort of event as big as it is without moving venues, which I don't know if they're willing to do. So
Right. Were you like making your exit strategy every time you entered a new?
I was like remembering what like my wife would say when they would do active shooter training at school because she's a teacher. And like for a long time, they're like, "Oh, just huddle down and try to hide." And now the big thing is, no, don't do that. Run, scatter, throw things is the best strategy. So I'm like, man, if something happens, I'm just going to tell everybody that and run and scatter. But I mean, you know, it didn't happen, and the chances of that happening are still very low. But it's on the mind, and it was something that occurred to me several times.
On brighter side, you were in a kind of game journalist game tournament.
Yeah, that was the panel.
I
talked about it the last couple of weeks that it was coming up, and it happened, and it was a good time. I think it was, you know, I was a part of it, but even when I wasn't up there on stage actually playing, I thought it was like a really entertaining panel, like a good show. And I've heard the same thing for people who did watch it. They're like, you know, some of these panels are I tune in because I'm a huge fan of like D&D or whatever, and they do Dungeons and Dragons panels, and I love those. And then but I watched this, and it's like this was just as good as anything else. So it was fun to be part of something so entertaining, and I did pretty okay, I think. So it was a multi-round thing. We played this track and field style game called Super Sport Matchin' to open it. And I had been practicing this game for like a week beforehand. Might have been one of the reasons I actually hurt my hand and caused a little bit of damage that week because it's one of those games, right, where you would like just like jam your hand against something and it might cramp up. But you know, and I'm practicing every event, thinking we're gonna like go through like a series of things. But he just Greg Miller, who threw it from Kind of Funny, he just had people playing like one game at a time. So like there'd be a you know 3 people playing one of the mini games, and then that game would end, and then whoever won it would go forward, and then the next mini game would come up, and the next trio would come up as well.
Which one did you do?
I did the one that I was like definitely the worst at, which was just the sprinting. Actually, it was the hurdle one. And it's difficult because I honestly couldn't figure out how to run in this game to start. I got you code. I don't know if you tried this game at all, Mike. Have you played?
I haven't been able to, no.
Right.
No.
So I'm like, tell me how to run in this game. So what I was doing
I remember you were saying that. You played this game and tell me what
because I couldn't figure because I would just trip. I would just continually trip, and I was getting so frustrated. And what I was doing wrong is just mashing the buttons as fast as I could. If you hit the same button, like you hit A and B to go, but if you hit A, B, 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 and you hit B multiple times in a row, you'll trip. You have to go A, B, A, B, A, B, and you can't ever hit the same button twice in a row, which adds quite a bit of like technical difficulty to it. I found, and then you have to hit the X button on a Y button equivalent on a like 360 controller or whatever to hurdle, and it's just a matter of like doing that rhythm of hitting A and B, and then also timing those jumps and trying to get at the very top of the hurdle, because if you hit the top of the hurdle, you get a speed boost. And I did really shittily, but everyone else did way worse. So it was cool. I got out of that round. It was a good time. And then we played Overcooked 2, which I didn't know what to expect. Greg told us we were going to be playing Overcooked 2. I had no idea. Okay, we're going to be playing like teams, like 2 people who survived, versus another 2 people who survived, and then those 2 people move on and then face each other or something like that. So I was expecting that. I was not expecting 1v1 where you are controlling multiple Overcooked characters by yourself, and that's what we ended up doing. So I was hoping to like rely on teamwork and figure stuff out together, and I did that just with like the people in the front row yelling at me what to do, because I played Overcooked 1 like on the Thanksgiving. It must not have been last year, maybe the year before. With some family while drinking, and it was a good time. We played through almost all of it, and that was kind of the extent of what I played. Figuring out all the minute details of the controls, like, oh, you want to throw this cheese over this gap, and then you want to control the other character, and then pick up that cheese or whatever, and then mash it over here. It was just a lot in the moment, but once again, you get the other guy, John, who's Mr. Megative on Twitter, if anyone knows him. He did worse, much worse. There's a bunch of really good photos of him online just looking so confused during that panel. It was very good.
Man, that's the game I might have tripped on, because I haven't really played those at all.
And also, everyone did.
Just know if you can publish your Overwatch story.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell him, yeah. Then,
I'll tell him, yes.
Oh, thank you, yeah. And then Smash Brothers was up next, and it was cool. It was cool because it was Smash Brothers Ultimate for
That's awesome that you guys were able to play that one.
Yeah, it was really neat, and it was like you could tell it was like a big finale thing, and they worked it out with Nintendo. And I talked to like some of the Nintendo PR guys afterwards. I'm like, yeah, it was actually pretty easy to set this up. The things you think are going to be a problem really aren't, and then it's all this stuff you don't think about that becomes an issue. But you know, they were able to make it work, and they had my name already programmed in there, like so I got to play as Grub, and I picked Cloud, like you told me, and I immediately lost track of the character because it was just it was like I had been playing 1v1, practicing 1v1, and thinking like, oh yeah, they're probably going to do that because it's Greg setting it up. I bet he's going to be one of those no items 1v1 players who play stock, and so that's what I was practicing. And we get into a round where it was 2 versus 2. It was teams, and I was playing with Dan Reichert from Giant Bomb, and just having all those characters on screen, and the TV's like down on the floor below us.
Were items on?
Items were on, yeah, and it wasn't stocked. It was time.
Time, man.
So it was
that's like Nintendo's standard.
Right, exactly. And Nintendo was the people. They were the people setting this up, and they right in front of me. They took the Switch and they like locked it to this little chain thing right on the table right in front of me that blocked my view of the TV. So I had to move and kind of like stand up a little bit to see. But yeah, there was definitely like Nintendo's default settings, and it was fine once I got used to it. But in that very first moment, I was losing track of my character, and I just ran right off. And
yours is the one with your name above it.
Yeah, I put 2 and 2 together eventually. That was another thing. I'm like, oh, Jeff. They're like, there is no Jeff. I'm like, what are you talking about? I still can't see the TV. And then like someone in the front row is like, Grub. I'm like, yeah, thank you.
I'm always going to wonder how I would have done in that Smash Bros. Part, but I might not have made it there with those other games. Who knows?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you probably would have won, I think, because, I mean, I guess, because you would have played against Dan if you were in the same exact position as me, and Dan's not very good at Smash either. So, the other two guys were better. Because one works for Nintendo Life, and the other one's a 14-year-old, Alex Rubens, who actually ended up winning the whole thing. So,
well, imagine that.
Yeah, of course, those kids are gonna, be better at me than Smash. But it was, whatever. It was a good time. I ended up losing because I think probably mostly because of that first death where I just ran off the side. I think had I not done that, my team probably would have at least been tied, and then we would have gone to sudden death and had a chance. But yeah, it was a really good time. I'm glad I partook in it, and I
sounds like you did good.
Want to get my vengeance? Yeah, it was. I was happy to do my to at least have a good showing as opposed to going out in like the first instant. There was one of those super sport matching events where it was like none of the people had played it before, and it was this boat rowing thing where you just have to like dodge stuff by moving left and right. And the very first obstacle comes up, and 2 of the people hit the first obstacle. So the match was over in like less than 30 seconds total. It was really funny. But yeah, enough of that. I guess I could just kind of talk about PAX stuff real quick and get it out of the way, and then we could talk about Spider-Man. Does that sound good?
Let's do it.
Okay, so PAX was a good show. I have decided, though, I think if I do one of these in the future, I might not be taking so many appointments. I'm just going to like take the stuff that I really want to see because stuff falls apart so quickly and then everything dominoes. And it's not a show where I think you need to worry about that stuff because like one of my appointments, and I'm glad I went to this one, I'm glad I made it, but was like Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And I literally had a review code for Shadow of the Tomb Raider in my email. So I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. And I'm like, all right, now here's hands-on. I'm like, guys, can we just skip this part? And they're like, oh, yeah, totally. They were excited about it. But it was like, most of the things are like that, where these games are coming out in a matter of days or weeks because it's the fall.
Right. That's what, it's pretty usual PAX.
Right. So I'm like, showing up to PAX, doing the panels, maybe going watching more panels and trying to do coverage of that stuff because there's interesting stuff happening there. That might be a better use of my time in the future, but we'll see. The things I did see, though, were... I talked to Shadow of the Tomb Raider team. That interview is up on the site now. I talked to them about removing the white paint trails that they used to kind of guide characters through Rise of the Tomb Raider. That was really distracting. They're not doing that anymore, and so they're doing all these other tricks that are much less noticeable and kind of it's smart stuff. It's good. And so I wrote about that, and that's up on the site now. If you guys want to actually look into that, we don't really need to go into that. The things I probably was most excited to check out, and that they're probably most worth talking about are Streets of Rage 4 and Windjammers 2. Windjammers 2, Windjammers 2, real quick. I just want to get it out of the way. It's more Windjammers, and it's which is if people that don't know, it's this like disc game where you throw discs at each other. And it's kind of like a fighting game, and it's a Neo Geo game that's really popular in France. And so this French publisher, Dotemu, is making a sequel. They're the ones that brought the game back originally, and it just feels like, and this might be true of both this and Streets of Rage 4. Like it's as if the developers of that time had the technology of today, and so they have all the same ideas and maybe slight improvements here and there. But it's beautiful HD graphics and 16:9 and all that great stuff that you would want from a game being made today. But I'm not sure if Windjammers 2 makes a lot of sense for that, because if you're a fan of those games, you just kind of the original's there, and if the second one's not different enough, it feels like it's something that could come and go, and then the people who are really into Windjammers are just going to go back and keep playing Windjammers. So they'll have to really add a lot, I think, to encourage, like maybe to foster a new audience and maybe bring some of those people forward that are still playing Windjammers today. But we'll see. Streets of Rage 4, though, it's good. It felt very early, mostly because
they haven't even announced platforms when they showed their trailer.
Exactly, and it was no capture and stuff like that, and it felt like it just had the one level that is ready to be played by anyone. And it looked and felt a lot like the first level from Streets of Rage 2, which is what you would want. And the things I noticed were that it felt exactly right, like throwing a punch as Axel, who I played as. You throw a punch into a guy, and all the enemies go flying backwards, and it does that like slight frame pause when you hit an enemy, and things pause for a second, and then they explode backwards. And all of that, like it felt like it was taken one from one, but it had all this new animation flourish that really made it pop. So they're doing a good balance, I think, of taking the frames of animation that you're used to and maintaining either the spirit of that or sometimes exactly all those frames, and then maybe adding a few things here and there that make it look like a eye-popping modern HD game. I don't know beyond that. Like, I still have questions about, like, are they going to be able to do new stuff that makes this genre feel fresh in a way that people will come to this series for the first time and have a good time? Or is it just going to be like this thing that capitalizes primarily on nostalgia, and it does a good job of that, but then it doesn't push things forward. It doesn't feel like a game that necessarily... It is hard
to, try to make the beat 'em up interesting. Like, Castle Crashers was able to do it with kind of like RPG mechanics and just some of the kind of fun of the 4-player multiplayer going on there. But like, even aside from Castle Crashers, which itself was kind of a while ago, I feel like there hasn't been a lot of big like beat 'em up successes.
I mean, it evolved into the character action game of Bayonetta and DMC and stuff.
Right.
Like, and that's
which are more interesting because they have like these specific combos.
Right, they're more complex, and also they are also kind of getting a bit old, as well. So we're an evolution and a revolution in this genre removed from Streets of Rage, and so I don't know. I hope they have like a bunch of secret ideas that they're ready to put in there, but I didn't notice anything yet, and again, it's very early. But just if you are someone who loves Streets of Rage and you're hoping that this is going to just kind of feel exactly like a sequel to Streets of Rage 3 and follow up and do that series justice, I think there's a good chance for that. They did not talk about having Yuzo Koshiro come in and do music, but it sounds like they're going to announce something. All of the music and sound effects they said in the game at this point are placeholder. So that's another thing that made it feel very early. So we'll see. I love Streets of Rage 2 quite a bit. But it's not one of those holy games to me where it's like if someone were to come in and do something with it, like, okay, I'd probably be willing to give it a shot. But I know there are a lot of people who hold it, put it up on that pedestal. So I hope for them that it delivers exactly what they want, and I'm just not sure if it's going to at this point.
Awesome.
Yeah. Not too much else to talk about. Valkyria Chronicles 4, I just started it. There's a lot of cutscenes and...
Yeah, I probably played what you did back in E3 because I played like the first several missions. And, it's fun.
Same. And it does seem fun. I'm getting into the tactics right now, kind of figuring out how everything works. If we get like a good balance of gameplay to cutscene ratio at some point, I think I'll be really into it. But if it continues with every couple of minutes, I'm dealing with a couple of minutes of cutscenes, that might be hard for me to push through. I just can't really handle that. My ADHD doesn't
want to hear about the problems of the pretty anime boys fighting in World War II?
Yeah, I know. I mean, if they could make it interesting, I would be, but it's just kind of lame and, you know, bad acting and stuff. And then I put together a PC. We're doing like a kind of a fall back to school sort of early holiday gift guide sort of thing. So I kind of looked around, got a bunch of parts put together, and it's fun to put PCs together. It worked immediately. I didn't have to do any troubleshooting. It just worked, which is great. It's super quiet and it's also super powerful. And I'm realizing, like, the one lesson I've really learned is get a good PSU, get a good power supply whenever you build a PC, because they'll last forever. And if it's loud, it doesn't matter if the rest of the PC's, you know, quiet. Like I got one over here where the power supply is louder than everything else put together, and it's like, oh, why did I skimp on that? It's just not worth it. So yeah, that's the one lesson I've taken away. I'm gonna start doing I'll do some benchmark tests on this new one. It's got an i7 8086K for anyone who, you know, cares. And I know Mike, I know that just doesn't mean anything to you, but
it's like gibberish,
right? Yeah. But it's a good CPU, and it's got a Vega 64 in there right now. I'll test out some stuff, see how it runs, and kind of getting ready for when the RTX cards come out and we get our hands on those to do some benchmarks. So yeah, that does it for me though, Mike. I did start another game, but I only just started it because I just haven't had time. And the swinging is good in Spider-Man, Mike. Turns out that works still.
Yes, swinging's great, and we kind of talked about that before, just from like our previews from E3. The thing that kind of impressed me a lot is how much fun the combat is, though.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah, like so many of these, not even just superhero games, but like third-person action games that aren't in that Bayonetta mold, right? Like they all kind of followed that Batman Arkham style of this very counter-based thing, which is funny because that was so new and exciting, and we thought that was great in Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. It got kind of old. Even I think those amazing Spider-Man games that were based off of those movies basically just had that same exact combat, right? Where you're throwing punches, people kind of come at you one or two at a time, and when you see like a yellow flash above your head, you push like the Y button or the triangle button, instantly knock them out. This is much more of a kind of like agile dodging based almost, where the enemies are more aggressive, like more of them will come at you at a time, more of them will be shooting at you from a distance and stuff like that. So you still have like your spider sense, you have like a flash above your head, but it's not so that you can do an instant counter like knock them out thing. It's so that you can dodge and kind of get out of the way of that. So a lot of the combat is about kind of crowd control, knocking people up in the air, so because it's harder for them to hit you if you're in the air, kind of prioritizing, oh, that guy has a rocket launcher, we got to swing over there and get him right away. So you're kind of moving around a lot, which feels really good. It feels much more Spider-Man-ish.
That is, I think it's a relief because I knew the swinging was going to be good, and then it seemed like, okay, well, they're going to have to make combat work to make this game actually pull through and deliver on the promise of Spider-Man. And when I played it at E3, I was like, you know, it's good, but it doesn't feel as deep as I was expecting, and it felt like it was going to be kind of a enemy management thing where Spider-Man is mostly the same throughout these combat encounters, but the enemies he's facing are going to be different, and I'm going to have to just kind of like go through and like, oh, there's the gun guy, I'll deal with him first, and then move on to these other guys, and that's going to be where the variety comes through. Is that in this game, or
Yeah, there's a little bit. Like there's like a guy with a shield, right? So to hit him, you have to slide under his leg. So you attack him, then you push the dodge button, right? So there's a bit. And Batman did do a similar thing, right? Like eventually you fought a guy who had like a lightning rod. There's a bit of that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't want that to be like, oh, that's how we're going to make combat feel varied.
No, but there's different ways to deal with all of those people too, with all your different gadgets and web abilities and throwing things and throwing other people. Yeah, there's a lot more variety. It's not so much as like, oh, there's this person, you use this specific thing for that or what have you. And there's also this interesting thing of like you build up a focus meter and you can spend that either to heal yourself, and it's the only way to heal yourself, there's no like regenerating health, or if you build up like a full meter, or like eventually you have like segments of the meter, you can do these like one hit KO attacks. which are really flashy and cool. But it's like neat that the trade-off is: are you going to go for these really quick kills, or are you going to want to heal yourself? It's kind of like a risk reward, even like a punishment reward on how you're doing in the combat.
How are the boss fights?
Boss fights are good. They pretty much they're almost not as plentiful as I may have liked.
Mm-hmm.
But they're definitely fun. More so, I like moments where you're chasing things through the city on the web. That's always fun and exciting. Really, the thing I like about the game is just how it gets like all the Spider-Man aspects, where you have like the swinging and the fighting, but even like taking photos is a part of the game. Doing some science things, even though like these turn into like the typical like not quite hacking mini games, but basically that kind of stuff. I still like it.
I heard it has pipe dreams. Does it have pipe dreams?
It's basically pipe dreams.
Yes,
yeah, it's pretty similar to pipe dreams. But yeah, and like just the kind of like the portrayal of Spider-Man as this super likable, always kind of do-gooder. It's just kind of refreshing right now too. So
yeah, I mean, tell me about that. Like, is the writing and the character and the acting? How does that all come through?
Yeah, it all seems like all the voice actors are doing a good job. The mocap looks really good. The story is fun. They get a lot of the characters in there. J. Jonah Jameson as like this Rush Limbaugh style radio host,
God, that's
like
so good.
kind of commenting on like whatever little thing you just like side mission you did is fantastic.
Is it a radio show or a podcast?
It's a radio show.
Okay,
it's a radio show because he has like callers and stuff.
Okay,
and usually the callers will be like saying that Spider-Man saved them, and then J. Jonah will get mad and like hang up on the screen. So it's classic stuff.
It's
right?
perfect for him too. It's such a good use of that character. I don't know if that's been in any of the comics, but if it hasn't, they should definitely take.
I think it actually is. I think that it is. I think in the comics, right? Because I was trying to read this, but I don't read like the new Spider-Man comics. But I think that's what he's doing in the comics right now. That's
awesome. Yeah. So I think maybe my last question is just: do you think it is a yeah, let's put it this way: is it a Game of the Year contender?
Yeah, I think so. For me. For sure. I loved it. I mean, I might have even liked it a little more than God of War, which I liked a lot.
Right.
But, yeah, just another really strong exclusive for Sony. I mean, it just seems like, yeah, like through the console games that, like, people could get the most excited about this year, and then God of War and now this, right? So, pretty big win.
Yeah, I had like another thought, but I can't really talk about too much of Shadow of the Tomb Raider just because it's still under embargo. But I was... Do you? This is an off topic now. Do you feel like Shadow of the Tomb Raider and some of these other games that are coming out right now are gonna get overshadowed by this?
Yeah, Shadow.
Yeah.
Shadow of the Tomb Raider maybe just because it's kind of coming so close. It's not that much like it, but it's kind of like it, right?
Right. It just feels like I thought like a few weeks ago, I'm like, oh, there's not that much coming out this holiday, but it still feels like some games are going to get lost. There was another one other than Shadow of the Tomb Raider that I'm like, oh, people might not even pay attention to that. But that's definitely the one that pops out to me like, oh, even if it's good, people might not show up for that one right away.
Yeah, which would maybe... I mean, Rise of the Tomb Raider... I mean, God, both the previous Tomb Raider games have always had, like, stories of how they didn't sell like people wanted them to, right? No matter how, like, well they actually do. So, there might be some truth to that. Who knows? But... It certainly seems like Spider-Man's going to be a bigger hit than Shadow of the Tomb Raider.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. It seems like that game is actually Spider-Man is going to end up as one of the top-selling games of the year, like maybe in the top 5. Do you think there's any chance of it outselling God of War? God of War, this is in the news, but we could just say, yeah, and God of War surpassed 9 million players, which is not exactly sales, but that's it's pretty good. That's a huge number. Yeah, I think Spider-Man might get up there, but that's going to be too tough to beat, I think.
That's going to be pretty tough.
Especially with the holidays still coming up, and God of War is going to get another boost then. Okay, let's see. I think we can move on to the news if that's okay with you, Mike.
Oh, it's okay with me.
All right, let's do the news. Let me bring up my rundown here of news blips, news beeps, news blops. First things first is just a delay from Nintendo and its direct video event that it was going to do yesterday. There was, well, earlier in the week, or maybe, I think it might have been last week at this point, there was a typhoon in Japan that was a pretty big deal. It caused the N of the Nintendo building to fall off. So they were already kind of recovering from a natural disaster that struck Japan and multiple prefectures in the country. And then earlier in the day in Japan time on yesterday, there was a major earthquake, a 6.72 magnitude earthquake in Hokkaido, Japan, which is a far northern mountainous region of Japan that isn't super populated, but it was such a major earthquake that it caused landslides and injuries, and some people did die. And I think Nintendo, more out of respect than anything else, and I don't think this necessarily reflected anything that Nintendo was dealing with. I don't think I don't think their power went out, for example. Sure. But I think out of just respect, they're like, we can push this back. We don't need to be talking about video games today. So I don't know. As of the last time I checked before the podcast, they hadn't announced a new date and time. I think that's still true.
It's weird because some of the things that were clearly supposed to be announcements for this have kind of happened anyway. Civilization 6 is coming out for Switch. We know now.
Exactly. That's coming November 16th. Right. And that obviously would have been like a small little trailer thing during the
which would have been a cool announcement.
Yeah, and then even I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, even the Mega Man 11 demo releasing on Switch yesterday night, it probably was going to be and then something they would have talked about.
And then this is more of like an accidental leak, but Yoshi's Crafted World showed up on Nintendo's website briefly. I don't
2019.
Yep, 2019 was in the title there. So so we have a better idea of when that's coming. We got a name.
I certainly believe that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That sounds like a name for that game.
But I think this also gives us an idea of like what we could have expected from, or what we can still expect from this Direct. It's going to be like, okay, we're going to get some answers about a lot of these games that we've been wondering about.
Right, because Yoshi's been I said, man, I wish I could get excited about that Yoshi game, but...
Yeah, I mean, Yoshi's Island is one of the best games ever made, and then the rest of the Yoshi games have been less so. I mean... It's hard to capture that. I mean, it shouldn't be hard because it's Nintendo and they do capture magic over and over. It feels like they don't try to make as good of a Yoshi's game as the first one ever. Maybe Nintendo doesn't think it's that good, but it is. It's
well, part of it's just like they kind of have rebranded Yoshi to be almost kind of like a Kirby, and that the games are very easy,
simple for kids. Yeah,
right. And part of the appeal of Yoshi's Island was like it was a platformer, right? Like people who were like kind of really good at these sort of games, really like the challenge. Like not that Yoshi's Island is like one of the hardest platformers ever, but it was certainly challenging.
No, but there's some
interesting.
There's some technical skill to a lot don't things that Yoshi does in that game, for sure.
Whereas Yoshi's Woolly World, I played through that game, I reviewed it. I don't know if I ever had any problems. I mean, I don't remember much of anything about the game, to be honest. I remember the way it looked. That's about it.
Yeah, and that is kind of it's a bummer to me because it does feel like Yoshi's Island straddled that line where it was. I think it could have been like this game where young kids played it and had a good time with it and they thought it was fun and it was simple for them. And
clearly, we were the kids. We liked it.
Yeah,
I remember.
You're right. That's a good point. Yeah, we were.
So I don't know.
But then, like, I also I 100%ed that game, and and I don't think even if you 100% any of the subsequent Yoshi games that you would feel that same sense of challenge. It just isn't there. Who knows? Maybe Crafted World is the return to form, but I do have some doubts about it. And you're right. I'm not going to get too excited about it. Anything else from this Nintendo thing? Or I think we can, looking at the rundown, I think that was it. Once we get a new date and time on that, come to GamesBeat.com. We'll have a full roundup of all the trailers and stuff, and we'll have all the news as well. Okay, moving on. This is a pretty dumb thing, I think. Valve is not going to moderate the chat in its new card game Artifact. Why? Mike, would anyone do this?
I don't know. I mean, Hearthstone doesn't even let players chat against each other.
Right.
And they still have problems of bullying. Like, that people can't actually talk. And, like, there's still so many instances of, like, people will then, like send the opponent a friend request on Battle.net just to yell at them.
Right.
Or call them things. Or, like, a lot of people even get mad when, like, they perceive the other player to be using the 6 emotes that you're allowed to use in like a mean way.
Yeah, no, people did that I mean, I remember that happening in Hearthstone when I played it, and it did bother me. But the worst one is Clash Royale. When I played that for a hot few months, there's this one emote where it's just this king laughing and then the king crying, or the two people would use, and they would spam those when they were beating you really hard. And it's like, God damn it, this sucks. I don't like the way this feels at all. I am being bullied right now. And that's just emotes. People are so Valve's reasoning is, if people are one-on-one, they don't really have a lot of reason to I guess troll would be the word. So we're not too worried about it. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, trolling isn't necessarily the thing. People are just going to be mean anyways.
Right?
They're going to amuse themselves. Like, some people are awful and they amuse themselves with this stuff.
Right? Yeah.
Actually, most of them that do it.
Yeah, exactly. They don't need the audience is like them, like, yeah, snidely giggling to themselves about how triggered you are or something. But like even beyond that, Mike, this is a game where you can trade cards and sell cards, and the other games that come to mind are like FIFA Ultimate Team. And for people that don't play FIFA Ultimate Team, what is the thing you associate with that game? People trying to steal your goddamn EA account because they want to buy and sell FIFA cards. That's going to be a problem here. And like, if you leave chat open, it creates such an opportunity for phishing and people trying to steal your personal information by like getting into friendly conversations with you and asking you like, oh, hey, where'd you grow up? Like, what street did you grow up on? Oh, cool. I'm going to use that as an answer to your secret question to get your credit card information. That like, it just like, I know you can't necessarily build games or build anything around the worst actors. But this game is going to attract a lot of people trying to fish for accounts. And I just think like having an open chat is a really bad idea for that. Even if you leave bullying out of it, which you shouldn't. But yeah.
I wonder if you'll at least be able to opt out of it. Like, can't you just say, look, I don't want to chat with anybody ever. I have no use in that. Yeah,
I would imagine that things are going to change quick for this because once the game launches and the Valve deals with whatever bugs they have to deal with. They'll look around and be like, okay, well, what's everyone mad about now? Or what's the community yelling at us about? And this is going to be one of them for sure. Because it's just, people don't want to play a game where they feel harassed. And then they also can see like people telling them about their family is a rich royalty and I'm a prince and give me your bank account number and I'll be able to put money in your account. And yeah. So we'll see. That's going to be fun, but that's Valve. That's just Valve.
Yeah, they're just going to try to make their platforms or whatever they're doing as open as possible for sometimes not great reasons.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this one just feels so naive. So yeah. I put this in here. This isn't really a news story, but it's a video I really liked on YouTube. Doom the Fake Outrage from YouTube account Sean and Jen, I think it is. And this was from the same guy that actually did a really good breakdown of the Cuphead controversy. And that wasn't just like Dean playing Cuphead, but like there were a few articles that were like, hey, let's talk about the art and like where that originates from. And then there was a ton of YouTube reaction to that being like, people are calling Cuphead racist and they want to ban it, which no one was doing. But you could find dozens of videos that claim people were saying exactly that. Doom the Fake Outrage is a sort of echo of that as well. I think we might have talked about this a little bit on previous podcasts. Where there was like two jokes in the trailer that were like, eye-rolly, and why would you do that? And that's not great writing. And then we moved on with our lives, and we haven't talked about it since. We really weren't that upset at the time. But there are dozens and dozens of YouTube videos where people that, like, I think most likely make money by stirring up controversy and getting reactionary young men mad, they just basically say, oh, yeah, there's all this outrage against this game, and the SJWs are coming for it, and they don't like their jokes, and they can't handle it, and they're so triggered. And it's just, like, such an overblown reaction to nothing, almost nothing, that it's a worthwhile video to watch and look into just to see how sort of how the YouTube sausage is made, and like how these self-echo chamber systems feed into themselves, and then just sort of like create controversy so they have something to comment on. Very worthwhile watch. All right, moving up to the next story. THQ Nordic has acquired Kingdoms of Amalur. I'm gonna ask the same question I asked her on an earlier one. Why?
Hey, some people seem excited about this. Some people like that game. I mean, it's fine.
I mean, I think I probably would have liked it had I played. I didn't play it, but
I bet they got a very good deal for it.
That's probably why. You're probably right. This is THQ Nordic's thing, though. I mean, we were just talking about them acquiring Time Splitters and the other one, Second Sight, from PlayStation 2 era, and now Kingdoms of Amalur was a 360 PlayStation 3 RPG from 38 Studios, which was Kurt Schilling's company, and they were going to make an MMO in the same universe, and this was the first game to sort of set that table. And then I can't remember what state it was, but Kurt Schilling, Rhode Island, was like, hey, what are you doing with all our money? It seems like you're not doing a very good job with our money. And then the developer, imploded, laid everyone off, and then Kurt Schilling got fired from ESPN for being a racist. All
connected.
All connected. And so that IP has been sitting there untouched, and no one was going to do anything with it, obviously. THQ Nordic shows up and buys it, and I'm interested to see if THQ has a plan beyond just acquiring these things. I'm sure it must have something in mind, but we'll see if it's
obviously going to make a new Time Splitters, because in that case they actually own that studio now.
And they said to basically expect something new from them.
And they acquired Darksiders, and Darksiders 3 is coming. Kingdoms of Amalur doesn't quite seem to be even on those levels.
Right. I think
maybe they can make a port of it for Xbox One if they wanted to.
I think they could probably do like a Switch version and be like, hey, look at this. This is a pretty big game that's beefy for your Switch, and it's not just like another one of those indie games. And maybe they've done the math, and they've we can definitely recoup our money that way. And then who knows, if that takes off, then we can look at doing a sequel or something. It might be one of those things where it's like, oh, they've acquired it, and the remaster of the port comes out, and then we forget about it, and nothing ever happens again, and then this new story is kind of not that big a deal. But it's interesting just to see what is THQ's strategy, how are they going to?
It's like, who are they getting now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're going to be the company that people start saying like, hey, pick this up, do this again, make that.
Yeah, honestly.
So we'll see. We already talked about Civilization 6 coming to the Switch. So then that takes us to God of War. We talked about that. That surpassed 9 million players. It's a lot of sales for that game. And I will...
Doing pretty good.
We'll reiterate that 9 million players means 9 million PlayStation accounts have played the game. And there are multiple accounts on some systems. So it's not exactly a great sales metric. But I would imagine 90% of those are sales at the very least. So, either way, doing very good. Going to be a top 5 best-selling game of the year. And as a console exclusive, that's really impressive. Here's speaking of sales, Dead Cells. Dead Cells is doing very well, and it's doing way better on the Switch than the PlayStation 4. According to the developer, it is outselling the Switch version is outselling the PlayStation 4 version by a factor of 4 to 1. I expected these games like that to do better on the Switch. By 2 to 1, but 4 to 1 is just such a huge difference. It feels like anyone who likes these games or wants to get these games, no matter what system they were playing them on before, PC or PlayStation 4 or whatever, they are just like, no, the Switch is the place to play these things, and it's totally worth it.
People were even talking about how the Switch version isn't technically as good as the PlayStation 4. Just dropped running, but no one cares.
No one cares.
It's so much better to play it on the Switch.
And the developer was like, we thought the performance was good enough. But, we're sorry, we're going to work on it. And it turns out they were probably right. It was good enough. No one's really talking about it anymore. No one mentions the performance on Switch anymore. If it was still a problem, they would be, because it's selling so goddamn much, and everyone would be mad about it. Good for them, and good for the Switch. You do continue to wonder, when does the rug get pulled out from under this party?
Right, how long can this go? I mean, in 2 years, is it still gonna be indies are just carrying the Switch forward? Or it's strange because there already is way more. There's a lot more of these indie games coming out than get the big sort of fanfare, right?
Right. I wonder if that glut is even really causing the problem, because it seems like even the smallest of these games are benefiting from coming to the Switch, and there are a lot of high profile for indie games coming out, like Hyper Light Drifter, I think, is out today, and that's probably gonna do really well as well, even though it's been out for years. And it's just it feels like the developers that have these games ready to go are just rushing to get them out before the holidays this year, because I think many of them don't necessarily believe that it's going to last forever. So it's a gold rush. But I don't think it'll drop off to the point where the Switch is selling the same number of indie games as Xbox One or PlayStation 4. I imagine it will continue to do better for a couple of years. Okay, so then next up, this was a big story recently. CCP Games, the developer of EVE Online, They've been plugging away and chugging along with making that game. They've tried a few things here and there, but EVE Online continues to be their bread and butter. And now that is the bread and butter for a Korean company called Pearl Abyss, because they have acquired CCP Games for $425 million. I mean, Pearl Abyss, they do MMOs of their own. They have Black Desert Online, which has 9.5 million players. And Korea is a market where it seems like MMOs are going to last forever. It's the best market for if you have a new MMO for some reason. If you like started one 10 years ago and you're just launching it now, Korea is probably the best market to focus on, because they are going to show up for these games and they will play them when other markets and other audiences in other countries don't really notice anymore. But that said, EVE Online does have an appeal worldwide. It doesn't have a huge audience, but it has a really dedicated audience.
Yeah, very engaged.
Very engaged. So I don't know. I wouldn't begin to try to imagine Pearl Abyss's strategy for this, but I would think they're like, hey, we can bring them in here, maybe expand EVE Online's appeal in Asia, which is something Pearl Abyss has lots of experience with. But then maybe they'll just want them to do other stuff with this EVE Online property that Pearl Abyss can help do, because it has pretty big bank account. Last story. Athlon Games is doing a new Lord of the Rings game. I don't know Athlon Games. I don't even know Lord of the Rings. What's that, Mike?
That's the thing with the nerds.
Okay. Magics. Thank you. Now I get it.
This is weird because
go ahead.
It's going to be a free-to-play online game. There already is a Lord of the Rings MMO, which I think we were talking about the other day, because it's like,
we just mentioned
what MMOs are still going, right? Yeah,
we looked it up. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's still a thing. So this will have to differentiate itself some, and apparently it's not going to take Lord of the Rings Online is literally taking place concurrently with Lord of the Rings somehow, which is interesting.
Right.
Whereas this game sounds like it's going to be a prequel, which is a lot of ground to cover if you're a Lord of the Rings fan. There's the first age, second age, even the earlier third age stuff. So Lord of the Rings is the end of the third age in the sort of Middle Earth timeline. So, and we're also getting that Netflix or Hulu or someone's doing
Amazon.
The show. Is it Amazon?
Amazon. I think that's what I remember. They spent like $1 billion on the rights or something.
So yeah, we're going to be seeing more multimedia kind of probably stretching out to some of these other areas.
Yeah, get in early on this and maybe have the game really picking up steam and really picking up users when the show comes out or something like that. That makes sense.
But we'll see.
Yeah, what do you want from a Lord of the Rings game?
Man, I remember when Lord of the Rings Online, when it was just called Middle Earth Online. This was back when MMOs were so exciting.
Right.
And how excited I was for that, because I was a big Middle Earth fan. And, that was back when I still thought that there'd be something to just, an online game where you were just kind of a denizen of an open world.
Yeah.
Sort of before I realized that, no, these things are ultimately going to be driven by people, wanting to do, fighting content, primarily, dungeons and raids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, I wish somehow there could be a game where there was, a stronger social aspect. Back when these things were happening, I just want to be a hobbit. I want to have my own hobbit hole, and I want to live in my hobbit town. And
that's what occurred to me too. Just talking about this,
right?
Yeah, that sounds like fun, but it's
not. It can't never happen because just the people you play these games with, and just not to be cynical about human nature, but just the way that these things go,
right?
And just the motivations most people have for these kind of games.
Yeah, I mean the one game I played where that did happen was Eco, but Eco doesn't have any content. It doesn't have story missions and things like that would draw you away from just building up the world. And it's that's a Minecraft-like game where people take on different jobs in the economy, and you specialize in a certain way to make to craft certain things. But that is our server was very small, and I don't think the servers go over 100 people or something like that. And it's always going to be the same people on the server. You have ownership over the server, so you can see all the reasons why it might work in a scenario like that. None of that sounds like a good foundation for a IP-based Lord of the Rings MMO game.
Yeah.
So yeah,
so Lord of the Rings Online was very much a World of Warcraft clone, and I hope they don't just do that again. I'm sure Lord of the Rings Online does some things different and maybe has done things since then that are interesting. But like, if I play this game and I'm immediately told to go kill 5 goblins, right, so that I can get like a better helmet, that it might just be a turn off right there.
Yes, I would imagine so. Especially for someone like you, you've learned the lesson now where like you don't need anything other than WoW. Like you're not going to get that. Like, even when a game does stuff that's more interesting or different, it'll just come into WoW eventually, and you've already put in all the groundwork with that. You don't. I imagine there's a lot of people like that now who are just going to be happy continuing to play WoW and never look at another MMO again. So yeah, did they confirm that it was just like an old-fashioned MMO, or could it be like something like Diablo or something?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I was thinking about that. Maybe it could be more Diablo-ish. I don't know.
Okay.
Dean wrote about it. I read a bit of his story, but Simple for Dean, it's a big story, and there's a lot of details there. I didn't quite absorb all of them.
You can check that out on GamesBeat.com. It's Athlon Games doing new Lord of the Rings game if you want to search for it. That does it for news, Mike. You want to get out of here?
Yeah, I want to stop looking at your stupid face.
Nope. It's a beautiful, perfect face. A smart face, some have even said. I would like you to tell people where they can find you on the internet. Is that okay?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter at Tolkoto, Tolkoto. I'm always writing on GamesBeat, and I also do the Exploding Barrel podcast with my brother every week, and that's at ebpodcast.com.
And I am Jeff Grubb on Twitter. On YouTube, I'm youtube.com/JeffreyGrubb, and twitch.tv/JeffGrubb if you want to see some live streams. I'm going to live stream putting together the other, like I have an Intel, this is the Intel based PC that I was just building. I'm going to build an AMD one. We'll probably give away one of these. We'll see. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. That's going to take some time. But I will be live streaming putting that PC together over the next week or two. Yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. Mike, you going to platinum Spider-Man?
I don't know. It is a game where I think it is fun to do everything I can. I don't know if I've never like intentionally platinumed a game anymore. I don't like trophy hunt like I used to. Maybe we'll see. Plus, there's already Tomb Raider to play now, right? So it's like
exactly
next thing's here.
Yep, I'm getting into Tomb Raider. Can't say too much about it, but I'm enjoying it so far. So, like I say, I really enjoyed what I played at PAX. How about that? I'll pretend I played it at PAX. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll get you next week. Until then, have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.